Hi there. Welcome to a very, very special time of Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father, a son, I'm not the father, and other people just come and talk about nerdy stuff. A lot of books.
Definitely nerdy stuff.
Uh,
Yes.
I'm Zach. You know that. It's down here.
The name, it is there. That's as a reminder for Zach so he doesn't forget. I'm Jim, the father, as it says over there. And yeah, we're Fantasy for the Ages. Thanks for joining us today. This is our celebration live stream. We've got people already with us in the chat. Awesome. Because we're just going to have a good time with all sorts of random topics and a bunch of guests as we celebrate having gone over 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. Woo, confetti, all that.
We hit the goal. I wanted to pass the year before we got to the next year, and we did it.
And then some now. We're at 21, 25 now. We just keep climbing before we can even get to the celebration. So this is fun. Thank you for all of you who have subscribed. And if you're with us today and you haven't done that, we'll take more. Come on, go ahead. Put it down there. Click subscribe. All right, let's bring in our guests. We have a few people to start with. We'll have others jump in along the way. And let's see who we have here. First up, Eric. Hey, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys.
Why are you here? How do we know you? Why did we invite you?
Well, mostly I know Jim. I've gotten to know Zach more, but I know Jim from our other life as educators. When we first met, we were both principals of schools. And since then, we both became not principals. And then one of us became a principal again. So Jim is my consultant guy. You're not really my boss, but you're like you're a higher up in my world. And but above all that, we're friends and fantasy nerds together.
And you are a published author as well, which is another reason it makes sense we connect, because you write fantasy.
I sure do. Did you check my merch?
Ooh, look, he's wearing merch.
Yeah.
Love it.
Nice.
Since I have a school, we did a logo wear store recently, and the person was like, "Do you want to put some of your little dragon symbol on some clothes?" And I was like, "Yes." I don't make any money from it, but it's free advertising.
Fun. It's fantastic.
It's fun. Yeah.
Awesome.
No,
Zach,
I can
attest. Say something before.
Yeah, I can attest that you have been known for a while. I have heard your name longer than we've been doing this, and we've been doing this 4 years now.
This is our 5th year now that we're starting. We're into our 5th year. We've done it 4 years. Yeah.
So, yeah, you've been around. This is the first time I've gotten the pleasure to actually see you finally, and it's really nice.
Absolutely.
Good to see you, Zach. And Zach is real.
He is real.
Well,
we've talked before.
And Eric, you've been on the show a number of times, but never when Zach shows up. So this is a first. No. Hey.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Let's see what Zach knows about Stephen King.
Ooh, not much.
As much as I should.
Let's bring in another guest. Glenn, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing? Congratulations, by the way.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. And why did we invite you? We have something to do with you. We know you. Tell us something.
I've had Jim on my channel, What the Adaptation, a dozen times now to talk about shows from Dune, Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings, and especially The Expanse. Jim is one of our most frequent guests for The Expanse. And he'll be coming back in January. We're doing season 4 starting in January, so we're looking forward to that.
Awesome. I don't know if you'd seen, but something we're very excited in the Wheel of Time fandom is that Shohreh is now, so excellent in The Expanse is now in the Wheel of Time TV adaptation.
Does that mean we're going to hear the F word from Elida, though?
I mean,
I
kind of hope so.
Really
I'm down for it.
I don't think that word shows up in the Wheel of Time.
No, but it's
she'll say it with her face. It'll be in her face.
I think it should show up.
Excellent choice for the role, though.
Oh, totally. That'll be fun. And Eric, you don't watch that show at all, do you?
Not at all. I know nothing.
I tried to get him to read the books. You've started and stalled.
It's okay.
The Wheel of Time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made it through 5 of them. I think that's
That's pretty
pretty.
good.
That's pretty impressive.
That is,
That's
but
pretty
you made
good.
it through 5 and not have continued is the shocking part.
Yeah, I needed a break, and the break has been going for like 3 years now.
Because
Yeah,
you just keep
sometimes
reading
people
Stephen
need
King.
that.
That's me and my break from Malazan. I needed a break, and it's been 2.5 years since I touched Memory of Ice. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll get
I
back
feel
to it.
that one actually.
You're still on Dead House Gates, Zach.
I got another chapter the other day.
Man, another chapter.
It has
it's a
been
rough setting, man.
something I've slowly been reading all year.
Scattered between things. All right, we got someone else in the green room. Welcome, Bill Matz Dagger. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you, and thanks for joining us. How do we know you?
Mostly through the Wheel of Time fandom is where I met Jim. This is my first time appearing with Zach as well. Watching for glitches just in case. Not sure he's real either.
Right.
might
Jim's
be
been on
AI,
our
yeah.
other show, Glenn and I's other show, Non-Terrestrial Half-Life, where we read books we read in the first half of our life. We reread them to see if they're still good or it's just nostalgia that made us think it was good. So, yeah. And
I don't think I'm
extremely
allowed
happy.
to appear on that one actually. No.
You are. You'll just make us feel really crusty.
Yeah.
I just turned 50. I don't need
Potter.
reminders.
You know, we review all this classic stuff from the past because it still has value, and people like Zach should go back and check out all that older content.
Though it sounds like the point
Indeed.
of the show
Hey,
is that
Carrie.
sometimes it doesn't have as much value.
Sometimes it doesn't. We reread it and go, you know what? This is genuinely bad.
Some
Dragons of
things
Summer
don't
Flame.
hold up, huh?
13, but it's just bad. It happens.
Yeah, Dragons of Summer Flame was pretty disappointing on a reread.
Oh,
That's
man,
for sure.
that was soul crushing.
That was
Just
ouch.
soul crushing.
Sometimes we
Ugh.
just have to remember how we felt back in the day.
Yeah,
Just cling
that
to
was
that.
one.
All right, we have another guest in the green room, and let's bring in Daniel. Hello, sir.
Hello, everyone. How's everybody
Black
doing
Tower
today?
Podcast.
We're doing good. We
Well-
are glad to have you with us.
Glad
What we're
to be
doing here
here.
with everybody is we're giving them a chance to say, how do we know you? Why in the world did we even invite you? We know you from something somewhere. Talk to us.
Cool. I'm Daniel. I used to be on the Black Tower podcast. I live in the Pacific Northwest, which is also where Jim and his wife live. And so
And me.
we have now gone to several conventions and met effectively at the airport or left the airport around the same time.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah, Jim's a great guy. I've also met Zach once at a convention.
It's happened.
It
Honestly, might have been
He is
twice.
real.
It might
but
have been.
also,
no,
like,
it was twice. It was
Yeah,
twice. Yeah,
I
yeah,
very
yeah.
much look. I'll talk here and I'll talk sometimes, but I am very much I'll just be small in the corner doing my own thing in a public space.
Indeed. No, and there is 1,000% nothing wrong with that. It just means that sometimes people are gonna not know you're real because they haven't met
for
you yet.
sure.
So, like
It
people
happens.
say, keep watching for when he glitches. Could be fake. Could be a
Indeed.
deep fake.
I'm 99% sure he's AI. Even though I've met him in real life, I'm still pretty sure he's AI.
It's okay. I'm 98% sure I'm AI.
But no, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations! Like
Yeah.
2000 is a milestone. That's amazing. Really,
That's
really well
huge.
done, you two.
Thank you. We still kind of pinch ourselves going, we're just having a good time. And
Right?
people actually want to watch this stuff.
It's
Awesome.
way more
Okay.
than 5.
It's
Yeah.
way more than 5 subscribers like you thought
It's
we
like at least 6.
At least.
Maybe 7.
No,
You guys, I
Daniel-
was watching one of your videos the other day, and Jim mentioned
Yeah?
we have well over 1,000 videos, and I thought, could that be true? And it is. There's so much stuff on there.
Yeah.
So you guys have just continued to pump it out. Amazing.
And at least 5 of those videos are very quality.
There you
Yes.
go. The farther that you go, the more painful they start to become. This is true because you learn as you go. Yeah.
Also correct.
Now, Daniel, there's a couple other cool things about you. You're the one person I know that I can go put a TV episode on and watch, as you won that game show.
That is correct. Yes.
That
4 years ago at this point. Oh my God, 4 years ago. 4 years ago at this point, I was actually on the very first season of the American Weakest Link. Which was very, very fun. It was hosted by Jane Lynch, who was doing her very best impression of the British woman who used to do the British Weakest Link. She's very funny. It was incredibly entertaining and super, super blessed to be part of that. And I won the episode, which is, I believe, episode 9 of season 1. It is called Whose Cereal is All Luck and No Charm. So if you have Peacock, so if you have Peacock or any other place that you can watch NBC, they are the ones who did that season, and I believe they're still doing seasons of it.
They are.
They are.
So
Now, I do enjoy the Weakest Link. I think it's a fun thing, but I'm scared right now because for my dad to bring that up makes me go, oh no, are we playing the Weakest Link?
No, I will not do that to you all. Not when I brought a ringer into the room. I won't.
Although I'm
I don't
totally
think one
okay
of
with
the show
Daniel doing
hosts-
the finger guns again.
Right. I've seen that video maybe 1,000 times by now.
Yeah, the
believe
Wheel of Time
you.
community has
Very
memed the hell out of that. So,
But
sorry.
the other thing, Daniel, is we're going to see each other, goodness, about 11 months from now for something special that you have going on in California. Do you want to plug that at all? You want to say anything about that?
I would love to. Thank you so much, Jim. It will stop being about me in about a minute and a half. But so while my partner and I were at WattCon this year, we got talking to a number of people about conventions on the West Coast and the fact that there really aren't very many. Well, sorry, there are a number of them not Wheel of Time related. The biggest ones are very much down south. So you have Dragon Con over on the East Coast in Georgia, and then San Diego Comic-Con over on this coast, but well south. And so we were thinking of what we could do to put something together that would be memorable. And so we decided that we wanted to go ahead and start something that was a little bit different. And so we are starting just a small, it's definitely not intended to be anything even remotely the size of like a Jordan Con, let alone anything even resembling like a Dragon Con. But it is basically a number of friends getting together doing sort of fandom shenanigans at a campground. So it's going to be called Story Treat. It's basically a play on stories and retreats kind of combined in the very Jordan-esque apostrophes way. And it's going to be outside of Sacramento. We have effectively 70 spots in like in sort of an area of the campground. It's open to all. The first year is going to be Wheel of Time themed, just because that is basically what I know in a lot of ways. And I've definitely, now attended several conventions. So it's the kind of thing that I am well familiar with. She is also very well familiar with that as well. But the intent is to go ahead and do more than just one thing. But
next
also,
year it'll be Dune down in the Mojave Desert.
Possibly. We'll see what happens. Yes, the intent is to go ahead and give each fandom sort of its moment to shine. Because one of the things that we noticed was there are a lot of conventions that are only one thing. So you have like Jordan Con down in Georgia that is Wheel of Time. And then there are a few other conventions about just one thing, or one fandom. Or you have Dragon Con, or Emerald City Comic-Con, or San Diego Comic-Con, which is everything. And they just try to do everything all at once, which, again, they do a relatively good job of, but it's just so much. So we wanted to go ahead and sort of take a year and give each fandom its time to shine. So as I said, we're starting with Wheel of Time because it's what we're familiar with. Next year will probably be something along the lines of like Lord of the Rings or Dune or Game of Thrones or something like that.
Hitters.
And then we'll go ahead and keep going from there and
Twilight.
do sort of 100%. That's the third year. It's already locked in.
That's the one that
I hate
kills
to
the
say
whole
it,
thing.
but it's got
I
it's got
sparkle in
staying
the
power.
sunlight.
Hey,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Forks is in our backyard, Dan.
I was literally gonna say, so this year is outside of Sacramento with Wheel of Time, because it's a lot of different things. Next year will be Dune in the Mojave Desert. We'll go straight up to Forks for Twilight Year 3. It'll be great.
So I will put something maybe in the show notes if Daniel gives me something where we can send them for more information. And what's exciting about it is I'm bringing my wife. It'll be her first ever fandom event.
Yes.
It was her idea.
Nice.
She's like, yeah, let's do it.
I
love
think
that.
That's
she
cool.
was never
Very
going to be
excited.
involved. One, I was shocked you got her to read the Wheel of Time finally. Two, when you did, it was with stipulation. Well, she was never going to go to a Jordan Con or a convention or something. We were never going to see her at that. Apparently, she loves you because she's down for this.
Aw.
I think
Nice.
that one was already proved. But yes, I mean, she's clearly showing the depth.
Yeah,
of
35
that
years
love.
of marriage. I think that one's pretty set. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Let's get to some shenanigans now. I'm going to keep watching the green room because I know other people will jump in at some points during here, but we've got stuff to talk about, debate about. And I have the first question. I pulled out one of the big ones right off the bat. Die Hard, Christmas movie or not? Go.
Yes.
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 No, it's
For sure.
not.
Yes.
Just
it
because a movie
is.
has Christmas in it does not make it a Christmas movie.
How
Christmas
many
is
people
about
watch
family.
it every
In the
Christmas,
movie,
though? I know I have a friend who watched it for the first time yesterday because it was the season.
I hate to say that I do think I agree it can count as a Christmas movie when you break it down and think about it a little bit further. Like, break down what are the morals and the things you need to see showing up in a Christmas movie, and you don't expect an action movie, but you do see themes that are necessary in a Christmas movie in Die Hard. Now, am I going to put it in as a Christmas classic that I watch? Hell no. But I respect people who do.
Well, and I was actually just going to say, I think that the movie itself is not, but the attitude around it has shifted and turned it into one where I think that while I will staunchly stand here and say, I don't think it's a Christmas movie, I can't argue with the fact that people use it as a Christmas movie and definitions change. And therefore, in some ways, it has very much become a Christmas movie, whether I like it or not.
See, like,
Well,
yeah. We're not going
question-
to see Die Hard in the Hallmark lineup of Christmas movies anytime
No.
soon, but it's comes with nostalgia now around the Christmas season. Bill, you were going to say
Is Home
something.
Alone? Is Home Alone a Christmas movie? Because
That's
Die Hard
my point. They're the
is
same
basically
movie.
Home Alone for
Yes.
adults.
Same kind of category.
So if you're gonna count Home Alone, you have to count Die Hard.
what an argument.
Now,
Man.
I'm okay not counting
I
Home
would
Alone
say
as
that.
well.
Me
But
too.
I've never even
just
seen Home
saying.
Alone, so
Oh,
Oh
my
my
goodness, you have
goodness.
not seen Home Alone?
Heard.
Stop the
I'm
live
the one
stream. We
person
have to
who's
watch
never
movie
seen it.
for movie.
You're dead to me, Glenn. Dead to me.
I know.
please tell me you've seen the best Christmas movie, Gremlins, which also
Of
takes place
Another
over
great
Christmas.
Christmas movie. Absolutely. Hey, Jordo makes a good point in the chat. So there we go. Lord of the Rings, Christmas movie. Bam.
Yeah.
Hard to argue, right?
Okay.
Well,
I mean,
no,
it is
Christmas a
kind of the
feature.
ultimate Christmas movie.
I've
It even
tended
has
every
elves.
Christmas break to watch the full extended edition of all three movies. Well, it's really just one movie. We all know that.
Right.
12-hour marathon. This is the time of year.
What is lembas bread if not a Christmas cookie?
Right? And it's got a man with a big white beard or a big
Indeed.
gray
True.
beard.
Several.
And then
Couple of them.
later on with a white beard.
And
Several elves.
There's elves.
Big heavy-set jolly fella named Tom Bombadil.
There
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
A giving of presents underneath a big tree.
Yeah. It's the wrong
Yeah.
wrong kind of tree, but 100%.
The party tree.
It works.
There's
Yeah.
at least 5 golden rings.
Oh,
Oh,
And there's
yeah.
one ring
Hold
to
on.
rule all of those 5 golden ones.
There is. Does
So-
that make Schmiegel be Starts with a G. Krampus doesn't start with a G, starts with a
No,
K.
it's like, what are you
Krampus.
talking about?
Krampus.
Schmeagol is Krampus in Lord of the Rings. Maybe not.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe not. Might be. Oh,
Ooh,
Jordo just
Sauron
keeps bringing it.
claws.
Just
Jordo.
keeps bringing it.
Oh.
Yep. There you go. There you go. Okay, let's move on. Next topic. This one, a little more nuanced. Let's talk about magic systems in fantasy. We're looking at preferences here now. Are clearly defined magical rules, like Brandon Sanderson, the hard magic we all talk about with his stuff, and others have copied it. Is that better than the ambiguous, softer magic like Lord of the Rings and Tolkien style? What's your preference? What do you think?
I'd say it depends on the type of story you're telling.
100%.
If you're really after something that is, with a hard magic system, you're kind of locking yourself into a lot of logic, whether it's real logic or not, but you're locking yourself into logic, and you got to kind of stick to that. Whereas with something like Lord of the Rings, Tolkien was much freer in what he could do. Magic could do anything. And my personal preference is I like somewhere in between. I like magic that can do anything, but I don't want it all clearly defined. Like your magic can do this, this, and this, but you can't do this.
Yeah.
I like there to be mystery on what's open for use,
And
I don't want to be able to figure everything out.
The magic ex machina, that just suddenly magic and we solve it. That's cheap.
At the same time, I'm also not a hard science fiction fan. I prefer softer science fiction. I'm a very much a space opera person. So Star Trek, Star Wars, stuff that's not hard science at all. So I like my fantasy literature squishy, I guess you could say.
All right. I want to ask Eric a question. Then we're going to get to Daniel because I know you have an opinion there. But Eric,
He had his hand up.
You're a fantasy author. What kind of magic did you use in your books? Soft or hard?
Well, as Glenn was talking, I was
Wow, I'm
agreeing with
clipping
him.
that.
Oh no!
Oh, wow.
Boy, here we
I
go.
don't know you guys
How
well
come it's
enough.
always you? It's never my fault.
It's always innocent Jim comes out of my mouth. I don't think about these things.
Right?
Anyway, I agree with Glenn. I think the magic should support the character. It should be secondary to the character. And so I mean, my books are middle grade. They're for kids. The themes are things like try hard and persevere and keep going. And the magic in my books is more. It supports that. It's like, hey, we tried something and we realized we were more powerful than we thought we were. So I agree with you too, Jim. Like an easy, quick magic solve is not. That's not satisfying. So
There we go. Daniel, what's your take?
I could not agree more with Glenn. Totally down for that. But I will also say one of the things that I love and one of the reasons that I've been a Jordan fan for so long is the idea that the magic system ends up being softer because people don't know as much as they think they know. And so when somebody comes in and tells you hard magic rules and you're sitting there being like, yeah, I've totally got this magic system. I understand it. I'm now locked in and logicking. And then somebody comes along and says, you absolute buffoon, you child, you have no idea how to use this. And then does something even more incredible than you thought was possible with the hard magic system that you thought it was. I really enjoy that because sort of unreliable narrator is one of my favorite things. And when you go ahead and have somebody show up and not that like magic machina, but like it then supports the character that they're bringing in or a character that has been there for the whole time and goes, oh, I just discovered something new or something old or, you know, whatever. I think that is one of the beautiful moments of bringing out that character in their own moment of either learning something new about that hard magic or discovering that somebody's been wrong the whole time.
I've seen in some books where that happens and fans can have very mixed reactions.
Also,
they're like, that's a cheat. The author sucks. He can't do that. And others are like, oh, that's brilliant.
Yep.
That
There's a
that
nice
just tells you
line.
about your reader. Are they on the are they this side of the spectrum or the other side?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Zach, jump in. Go ahead.
There's a nice line there that I think a perceptive reader is not as upset about if they look at it and go, this is still a hard magic system. There are clearly defined rules that the author has. They've just been lying to us about what they are.
Yes. And there are two ways to do it, because again, it can sometimes end up being a situation where the author didn't actually have as set of a thing as they wanted.
Mhm.
And they're just kind of throwing that in as a, oh, I need to change the rules now on you, but it wasn't really planned from the beginning. It wasn't something that they kind of intended to do, and now they've just decided that they kind of have to. And that can be kind of rule of cool, but it's also a little bit of a cop-out. But when it's done incredibly well, and it's not to shore up a plot hole or a magic hole or something that they made for themselves earlier, but it's legitimately what you just said of, no, the author has been lying to you the whole time on purpose.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
they've given you signs that that's true, and you've picked up on them. But now is the fruition of those signs. That's when it's really amazing and it feels great. It can be done well, even over here in the kind of like shoring up a plot hole, but it definitely gets done way better when it's intentional from the beginning.
Well, and my personal preference, the biggest reason I have my preference where it is in sci-fi a soft science, but in fantasy a harder magic, because it leaves the door open for fans to theory craft. There is more room for you to be able to creatively think, what is the author doing? Where could this go? What is the possibility? And if you go too soft on the magic, to me, it's too open of, well, they can just do whatever they want. I can't guess what they're going to do because they can do whatever they want. But if it's too hard on the science, then it's like, do I have to have a PhD in physics to understand what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah.
I
I
feel
was
dumb
thinking,
enough
you
as
know,
it is.
No.
Don't need
As
help.
these guys were talking, it occurred to me that I think a really interesting way for an author to do hard magic would be to treat it the way like Isaac Asimov treated the laws of robotics. You know, the laws of robotics, they're fictional, but they're a very hard form of science because it locks you in and you really have to think through, how does this work? What is the meaning of this? You know, like in this situation, if the author is exploring his magic system in the same way, that would be for a really interesting, you know, and I think Sanderson has done that to some extent, you know, especially with the Mistborn stuff. You know, I just think that's a good use for a hard magic system, is where you're treating it the way Asimov treated the laws of robotics, and you're examining the meaning of what the result of this system is.
Yeah.
Hey, Leia.
Good stuff. Good stuff. When the magic system, you know, if it's hard, if it's soft, there's lots of nuances to all of this. But for me, what's most important is that it supports the story and doesn't cheapen the story. Because that's always what I'm really there for. Yeah, okay, I like the rest of the details to be good, but give me a good story. And if the magic is getting in the way, that's a problem. All right, next one. This is a new topic, and it's just which side of the spectrum do you fall when you think of your favorites, your preferences? Are you more Hogwarts or the Dark Tower?
Ooh.
Very
Dark Tower,
different
100%.
styles, both fantasy.
Dark
Eric, I don't
Tower.
even have to ask you. And look at Zach, I don't even have to ask him. But
Sight
go ahead.
I like
unseen,
them. I like
I've
them
never
both,
read
but
either
I have
series.
one of them tattooed on me, and it's
Ooh,
not
Yeah.
Harry Potter.
look at that.
Oh, and the
Huh?
keyhole.
As
So-
someone who's never read either, I'm going to side with the Dark Tower just because it's a little bit more grown up.
Wow.
Wow, Zach, do you
that
take offense
shows
with
a
that?
truly
To a certain extent, I'm not going to take
Look,
offense to
Daniel
it
and
because
Zach both have their
I
wands.
think the joy of Harry Potter is in the whimsy. It's in that it is a little bit younger. It is a, to me, genre defining series because it more or less created YA.
Okay.
It defined YA.
Dark
YA was
Tower-
there.
It was there,
The
but
Dark
it wasn't
Tower
what it is today.
is more like what
No.
he slipped in what he was saying. It's a genre defying series.
It didn't defy a whole lot.
Ooh,
Sorry, I shouldn't
that
say
too.
that.
Dark Tower has so much going on. I mean,
Yeah.
is it fantasy? Is it a Western? Is it science fiction? Is it
Yes.
Yes,
The answer
it's
is
all of
yes.
this, and it's brilliant in that way. But you can get into and just enjoy Harry Potter. It's just fun and delightful. You have to work a little more in the Dark Tower. Not
Yes, you do.
everyone's going to appreciate it.
I'll throw Stephen King a bone. I haven't read The Dark Tower. Like, that's at the end of the day, that's where we're at. I pick Harry Potter because I haven't read The Dark Tower yet.
See, I've not read either, but I have watched all the Harry Potter movies.
Mm.
Harry Potter's okay. I don't really have anything against Harry Potter itself. It's certain baggage with the author
Sure.
that I have problems with. So
Same.
I can separate. I try
I
and
try to.
separate arts of work from the artist.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. It kind of depends on an individual basis for me. Sometimes I can, though. So, with Harry Potter, I can sort of distance myself from any issue with that and just enjoy the story for the story. And I like Harry Potter, don't get me wrong, but I love The Dark Tower. And when I say I love it, I mean, my wall behind me is nothing but Stephen King and Dark Tower. My whole wall.
I can attest to that.
If we
To be
were,
fair,
Eric,
right now,
you're meeting a
the
new
wall
best
behind
friend
you
right
is
here. Look at this.
Yes.
Right.
Eric is
Yeah,
a major
it is.
Stephen King fan. He's been on for 2 Stephen King episodes I've done.
Nice.
Well, here's my update that I was going to tell you guys. I'm a Dark Tower fanatic as well. I've been through it 6 or 7 times, and I'm right in the middle of it right now. But my books that I'm writing are for Harry Potter age fans, so it's a mashup, because in my head I'm thinking like, I love how Stephen King really does defy genre. He's like, yeah, this one I'm feeling Western. Let's do a Western with robots.
are you telling me that you're writing gateway books to prepare people to launch into the Dark Tower when they get
Oh
older?
yes,
He really
Oh,
totally
yeah.
is.
Absolutely.
for sure.
Speaking of, these are the
For
books.
sure.
Here they are. They're awesome.
hey,
Woo!
From
So
first to most recent.
beautiful.
The third book is so full of Stephen King Easter eggs. Well, Stephen King is a character in my third book, and I was
Nice.
like, for middle grade, but he's a good Stephen King. And here's the thing about Stephen King, the author. Unless you're a super hardcore Republican, no one has any problem with Stephen King. I mean, he is political, but he's a super nice guy. Everyone loves him who's ever met him. But yeah, I'm writing the Dark Tower Gateway series. Just no one knows it yet.
When I
Except
read
Jim.
Eric's books, I was, especially as we get to the third one, I'm cracking up because of so many Stephen King references. And yes, then he even becomes a character. The references were happening already in the first book, but they get more and more pronounced. And the third book, if you're a Stephen King fan reading this, you're just dying, because kids who are reading this book have no idea, no clue of these things.
They have
It's
no
so
idea. Well,
good.
and it's not to trick them or pull one over on them.
No,
It's
it
just,
all works.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me a lot of like the old school Disney classics or like the Pixar movies.
They appeal to
Where-
all ages for different reasons.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
These are
Toy
great
Story, man, was
movies.
so much for adults and kids at different levels.
Exactly. And when you watch The Incredibles, kids are just going to get it's a fun superhero movie where he has to save his family. Great. We're all in. And what makes people individual is what makes people individual, and we should celebrate that. That's the moral of The Incredibles when you watch it as a child. And then as you get older and you watch it as an adult, you get all of these wonderful, like, let's talk about the insurance industry and how broken it is. Let's go ahead and have the mom and dad have a fight in the car on the way to save the city about the best way to get downtown. Like, again, there are all these just wonderful pieces of it that you're like, okay, I've seen my parents have that fight in the car. Why is I don't get it. It's not funny. But then when you're older, you're like, It doesn't matter how you get downtown. It doesn't matter how you get downtown. Just take whatever thing is going to get you there and save the freaking city. Like, but yeah, I love that about it. I have not read these books, but I would like to at this point, because it sounds like it's very much the same. You know, here's a kid's book for the kids, and then when you read it as an adult, here are all these Stephen King references and things like that. So well done.
Totally. And I will attest to that. If you're an adult, you can still read these books and actually find good, wholesome entertainment in a fantasy genre. It's nice. I'll drop links to where you can find Eric's books down in the show notes, as I keep thinking of other things to drop in the show notes. There'll be long show notes this time. That's great. Speaking of things I should link people and show, I just have to throw in this comment that was in the chat and is just hilarious.
I mean, that's a
you,
really
Carrie.
reliable
There you go.
comment. I believe it wholeheartedly.
No spoilers for Carrie. She hasn't finished.
She's getting close.
Right.
She's still got
Yeah,
what,
She's getting there.
two
Oh,
and a little
that's
bit
the
more.
problem. She hasn't gotten to any of the unreliable narrators. Okay, it all makes sense now.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's good communication in the Wheel of Time too.
Oh, it's known
All
for
the
really
characters
good.
really talk to each other.
and the sex scenes are fantastically on point all
What
the way
sex
through.
scenes?
And there's zero spanking.
And great romance.
And such big eyes.
I think
So many of the characters have such big, beautiful eyes.
I think we read different Wheel of Times.
All right. Next question. We talk about fantasy and science fiction, both of which are huge genres of their own, but have a lot of crossover, a lot in common. But which genre do you generally think actually offers more creativity?
I think they're the same thing, to be honest. I don't think separating them makes much sense, because most science fiction is just fantasy in space. That's all it is. Or fantasy with a little bit of science to balance out the fantasy elements. But there are elements that are absolutely the same in both. So I kind of squish them together into one giant ball and kick that around. So I love both, to be honest. I mean, what is Dune? Is it fantasy? Is it science fiction? Yes.
Yes.
It is.
It's got
There's
both.
a lot that are both, that's for sure.
I mean,
You guys were
I've been
talking
saying
about-
Go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say, you guys were talking about rereading things you read as a child. I recently reread Ender's Game.
Great book.
It's a classic.
book. Yeah.
And this one was
Fantastic
the
movie too.
Yes, it was a good adaptation.
it was the 20th anniversary version. So Orson Scott Card had like a 50-minute author's note afterward.
Oh wow!
And he talked about early selling stories, and that he had a sci-fi story he had written that he was real excited about. Send it in, and the editor said, "This is fantasy." And so Orson Scott Card, he comes to in this afterward. They're the same thing. Science fiction has rivets, fantasy has forests. If one of those is present, then you've got your category. But so going along with what Bill said there, they're the same thing. It's just the setting.
Which is
I've been
why some
recording
people
my-
will use
Orson
that
Scott Card.
broader term and just say speculative fiction. Okay, we're making things up. It's something fantastical. It might involve dwarves and elves. It might involve aliens, but it's still fantastical.
So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
wholeheartedly agree with everything that's been said.
But I hear a but coming. Go ahead, Zach.
Yep.
I'm here
I'm
for
But I
waiting.
do have
Glenn
people in
didn't
my
even
life.
get to talk yet.
I have people in my life who are very wonderful people, love their sci-fi, but really love the hard science sci-fi, and wholeheartedly would reject anything fantasy. The idea that sci-fi is fantasy, and there is a portion of sci-fi that I think tries to lean so hard into trying to make sure its science is good science that it really tries not to be something that can be mingled with fantasy. I still think it's speculative enough. We don't know. I'm with you on the camp of going, it's all intermingled and kind of the same stuff. But I understand people coming from the argument of going, no, this is my real science stuff.
Yeah.
See,
All right, we're
I
gonna
was-
stick a pin in that comment. I want to come back to that, but Glenn, you were gonna say something
Mhm.
before that we missed. So let's get
Yeah,
back to
I've
what you were
been-
gonna say.
I've been defining for a few years now. I've been defining fantasy as the form of literature or fiction that deals with the fantastical. It's literally right there in the name. And to me, it doesn't matter if that fantastical element comes from magic or technology. If it's fantastical, not something we would see, like you could literally see, hear, and do now, then it's fantasy. Even if it's just the smallest little bit, it's fantasy. Like Flowers for Algernon. There's one bit of science fiction in it that's a surgery. The rest of it's just a human story, but I would still call it fantasy because it's got that fantastical element of a surgery that makes a character a genius.
Great story.
You know, so
Oh, yeah.
that's all it takes is one fantastical element and it's fantasy.
Okay, so along that line, and blending it in with what Zach said about some hard science fiction, truly trying to be genuine, 100%. This could happen. This is real. I think there may be some science fiction that truly doesn't fit the parameters of fantasy. A case I might put forward is Andy Weir and The Martian. There's really nothing in that movie that happens that couldn't already happen. It just hasn't yet because we haven't gone
There
there.
is one thing. There is one thing, and it's one of the spots where he had his science down. The wind on Mars would not have blown him the way it does. The wind, there's seriously not enough air.
There's not
on
enough
Mars, no
atmosphere
matter
to
how hard
create
it's
those
blowing.
storm. Yeah, you're 100% correct.
It would
on
never
that.
have blown everything around. It never. So he never would have been stuck there. The way that he's stuck there in that story.
So you're wrong. The Martian is a fantasy, Jim.
Yeah, Jim.
Well,
It wasn't 100% accurate, so it's fantasy.
It is so good, though. Oh my goodness!
Oh,
and
without
that
a
is an
doubt.
adaptation that is also excellent. The movie
That is
is
correct.
fantastic.
Yeah.
A little different from the book, but still fantastic.
Yeah.
There's a point in that movie that just gets to me. At that end, when they're all jogging past him, sitting on the bench, and they stop, salute, and then carry on, just like, it really hits me.
Daniel, jump in. What you got?
I was gonna say I totally agree again with everything that everyone's saying, including Zach. And I just want to throw out there that one of the things that annoys me a little bit isn't necessarily the idea that when you go ahead and have these like softer sci-fi or harder fantasy or like fantasy that adds magic to the world we already live in and things like that, where there isn't a huge overlap between the two. And I agree that once you get over onto either side, it does sort of break apart at the seams. With like, again, just being incredibly science focused sci-fi or like, again, Lord of the Rings. I would not call that science fiction in any way, shape, or form. It is entirely fantasy. And again, it's got nothing. It's in a completely different world. It's a completely different magic. The races are barely even the same, like as far as just a lot of them are humanoid. But there's only one group of people in that realm that is even remotely like us. But bookstores, get your shit together. That's really all I can say. Because again, I don't actually have that much of a problem of like mentally blending them a lot because there really is so much stuff that is both. But going over and having like one shelf or maybe two shelves or bookcases, really not just shelves, but like bookcases of just sci-fi fantasy hurts me a little bit. Like I want you to put a little bit more thought into helping those people who want something a little bit more over here or a little bit more over here with an understanding that there is a lot in the middle. But putting the super hard science stuff in fantasy for people to pick up and go, this is not what I wanted at all, or super fantasy stuff for the people who want the hard science just ends up being really annoying. So yeah, again, connotatively, could not agree more. Bookstores need to do it a little bit more denotatively of what the difference between the two is.
I have a quick little question for you guys.
All
I know
right.
where I would fall down, but if you've got a story that's a secondary world, non-Earth world, but there's no magic, no magic at all, is that fantasy?
You don't have to have magic to be fantasy.
Technically.
So, yeah. It could just be a parallel world, a different planet.
Mind
It
general
was
usually.
It was something I'd seen a
Another
while back
level
on
of
one
the
of the
tower.
forums I frequented.
Mhm.
You know, that was a point of discussion of whether or not that's fantasy, if it's a fictional world with no, a secondary world with no magic. And I would say yes, because it's a fantastical element.
Mhm.
But then
I would
all
also
fiction
say,
would be
again,
fantasy.
it also kind of comes back to, does your new world have forests or rivets? Because again, yes, this is where that crossover is, because technically it is fantasy. You have made a new world, you have world built in a new world, which kind of definitively makes it fantasy, but also, what does it look like? What is the feel of it? Is it Star Trek where you've made a new galaxy that isn't ours?
Right.
Or is it Tolkien without magic? Like, again, it starts to become a little bit more nuanced there, which is why, again, connotatively, this is all, it gets very, very muddy.
Let's get into the bookstore for a moment. If you don't have magic, it's a separate world building. Like you were saying, if it looks like tech stuff, put it in sci-fi. If it looks
Mhm.
like Tolkien but doesn't have magic, put it in fantasy. But otherwise, I'm probably searching through the shelves and shelves and shelves of
Fiction.
just fiction,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
which I could classify it as both of those things. I could enjoy it, but where am I going to find in the bookstore? Probably just fiction.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing in bookstores too, though. I mean, I go to a bookstore not very often these days, but when I do, all I do is head for the fantasy and science fiction section and spend all my time looking through books there. And oh, I have that one already. Ooh, that's on my TBR. Ooh, what's this? And that's what I do. But then there's the long, big section just called fiction. And it's almost like it's elevated as the real quality novels, as opposed to that thing over there, that sci-fi fantasy.
The redheaded stepchild that is fantasy and sci-fi.
But sometimes that's where I find the things that I go expecting to look in the sci-fi or the fiction. Like I went the other day, a little while back, and I picked up The Will of the Many, which I'm planning to read soon.
I've
I haven't
heard
gotten
great
there yet,
things.
but I was
Yeah.
expecting to look like maybe in fantasy. I'm like, I think it's got magic or something or other, and it was just in fiction, and I'm down for that.
Really?
But it took me longer to find it.
James Islington, he's arrived.
I found his like
Fiction
Lycanius
section.
trilogy in fantasy, and then I had to look around and find, okay, it wasn't by his name where I thought it was. Where am I looking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
There are some authors who don't want to be classified under science fiction or fantasy. Like Margaret Atwood, for instance, really hated the fact that people consider Handmaid's Tale and its sequel to be science fiction. And I guess the same for the other one that I know of, Oryx and Crake.
Loved Orson
Is always
Craig.
listed as science fiction. And she rejects, I've seen interviews where she rejects that she's a science fiction author. And I just think that's a little unfortunate, that there are authors who still in this day, when the vast majority of our entertainment media is dominated by science fiction and fantasy, which as far as I can tell is the majority of video games. Most games out there are sci-fi or fantasy. And the video game market is the largest entertainment market there is. It outdoes movies and TVs by order of magnitude. So it's just like, this is the day and age of science fiction and fantasy. And people still try to avoid being labeled that. Is just wake up. It's 21st
Yeah, I
century.
think the biggest problem with that is that just she recognized something, and bookstores are now having to put Handmaid's Tale in nonfiction, because that's
we're
the world
getting
that we live in.
And
Oh
that's
my.
so I read
my.
the Matt
Please
Adams
no.
trilogy. I loved it. And to me, it screamed sci-fi in the same way that like 1984
Mm,
screamed
Yeah,
sci-fi. It is sci-fi,
that's a great example.
but it's a commentary on the state of the world, how we are, what things could be, that reaches to some deeper truths. And I could understand as like, well, I don't want to be compared to the same sci-fi as some other things that are a fun story, but not trying to tell that
Yeah.
other side of deeper commentary. I think everyone's allowed to write what they're going to write, but I can understand wanting those to be a little bit separate as an author, I guess.
And Zach demonstrates he is the deeper thinker of our channel. Good job. Good job.
You know,
And that's why
it's
he's
made me
AI.
realize that my definition of fantasy actually, has a problem with it, because something that was science fictional, say 100 years ago, and is perfectly normal every day now, is that still science fiction? It was science fiction when it was written, but
Now it's
is
maybe
it
just
science fiction today when we've got everything that's in that story? So that's a
I'd say
weakness I've just come to
yes.
realize in my definition.
Yeah.
Given Ender's Game, basically tablets and drone warfare were science
Mhm.
fiction, then they are no longer science fiction, but it's still
Yeah.
a science fiction / fantasy story. So
I would still love, though, to play the game, their training battle game where, no gravity, freeze
Oh,
them with the
yeah.
gauntlet. I
Yeah.
mean, that would be
The
fun.
enemy's
That
gate
would
is
just be
down.
fun.
Yeah.
We'd probably all be
Enemy's gate is down.
nauseous, but it would be fun.
Hey, I had to get used to my VR headset. It'd just be the same thing. Just get used to it, bro. No, I'm just kidding.
0G laser tag.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
It'd be
All right.
weird
That's
shooting
just
with
too fun.
zero recoil. Just
Trivia
weird.
question time. Okay, the simple common intellectual property
42.
here. Can you pull this out of your head? No, that's not it. What is the
A
name
good
of
answer.
Gandalf's sword in the Lord of the Rings?
Glamdring.
There it
Correct.
is. Glenn
Yep.
nailed it. Glamdring. Ding, 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 ding. You win the no prize. There are no prizes here today.
I was going to say Viagra, but no.
Oof.
Oh, wrong sword, Bill. Wrong sword.
Sorry.
That would be a spear. Watch the spears.
Moving
I
on.
don't think the maidens would think so.
My next topic. We've already mentioned these franchises. Let's dig in just a little bit more. Star Wars and Star Trek. Which franchise would you say has had the greater cultural impact?
Oh, that's a hard one.
That's what I'm here for.
I'm
My
flipping that, too.
instinct is to say Star Wars, but Star Trek came before it, and I think Star Trek did have some influence on the
Well,
existence of Star Wars.
Yeah, the original series.
Man,
The same argument
I'm
could
gonna
be
have
made, though, that they discarded Star Trek until Star Wars came out. People
they
liked
totally
it,
did.
and they brought Star Trek back.
Star Wars was a big hit, and they're like,
Yeah.
hey, don't we have something like that in the vaults? What didn't we have? Yeah, you did.
I might have, I'll probably have to come down on Lucas's side. I think Lucas,
Yeah.
because it's not just Star Wars itself; it's all the technological stuff that came behind Star Wars and with the creation of Star Wars, which has led to everything else since then. I mean, you just have to watch Industrial Light or Light and Magic on Disney Plus, the documentary about ILM, to see the effect that Lucas's little company that he made has had on the entire film industry. It's just
Well, but we
But
want
we're
to talk.
talking cultural impact, though.
Yeah,
Consider
cultural.
what- consider the
that.
purposes Star Trek had in so much of its script writing.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, the things it was saying about society, about culture, about humanity.
I
I
mean,
think Star Trek actually touched on more issues that are current to society than Star Wars did.
Yeah.
It broke race barriers when it was on. That
First interracial kiss on
interracial
screen.
kiss, the first ever interracial kiss was on Star Trek. I mean, that was
Same
unheard
person.
of and unthinkable, and they did it against the network. Flat out
They
told
also
them
had
don't
the
do
first-
it, and they did it anyway. So
They also had the first girl-on-girl kiss on network television in Deep Space
Right,
Nine.
So I think society-wise, Star Trek probably had a bigger. Plus, half the technology on Star Trek is real now.
That's what
And
Jordan
we got
dropped
the
in the chat
ideas.
there. Yeah.
So
Yeah, there you go.
I'd say Star Trek absolutely, culturally, and society. I think Star Trek had more influence.
Eric,
Very
what about you? What are your thoughts?
I want to hear from Daniel first because I do not feel like I'm qualified to answer this one.
Okay.
I don't know much Trek at all. I'm a Star Wars guy, but I have a thought, but I want to hear Daniel first.
Heard. I will make it quick because I think that this is an interesting question. because I think that Star Trek is so much more culturally based. And it deals with so much of human culture rather than Star Wars. But I would actually say that at this point, I would say that Star Wars has made a larger cultural impact. I think that Star Trek is more culturally impactful, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think piggybacking on that, you walk up to anyone on the street, they're more likely to answer this question saying Star Wars than Star Trek.
Probably.
If you're well versed in both, you might think Star Trek, but that's because a lot of its impacts are a little bit more subtle, a little sneakier, a little bit.
And you mean old? It's okay. You can say it.
Not even, because there is great Star Trek out here and now.
There is.
But
Well,
some
yeah,
of
still
Star Trek
dealing with
Discovery was
cultural issues.
boundaries, big time.
And
are
still very deep.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
just about when those things happened, why those things happened, and the after effects of them. I think that the reverberations and the ripples of Star Trek are probably bigger than Star Wars, but they are again more subtle. And so I think that the culture, like the overt cultural impact of Star Wars is bigger. The actual cultural impact of Star Trek is bigger, deeper, however you want to describe that.
Hits harder.
Hits harder. There we go. Yeah. Eric.
I guess my thought is, again, with being relatively light on my Star Trek, I would say I feel like Star Trek is more modern culture, while Star Wars, he kind of reached back toward mythology and like deep human, just the human story. So I think they both are, but I think like some of the threads and themes in Star Wars, because that's the one I know more, are just deep, like human from history, from ever kind of things. So I thought Daniel's answer was the perfect answer, and that I want to watch more Star Trek. The things I've seen make me totally agree with that answer, but I think Star Wars is a win because it's just tapping into things that are just eternal for humanity.
Nice.
So, let me ask.
So, Daniel, you are not the weakest link. Hello.
Is it
Thank you, Eric.
possible that this is just a symptom of format? That predominantly Star Trek has been series, TV show episodes that we see. Yeah, it's had movies, but most of it has been shows and things. And Star Wars has had shows, but most of it have been big blockbuster movies.
I was also going to say Star Trek has also had movies that have been very hit or miss. And if I had said this comment 10 years ago, I would have said, but basically all of the Star Wars movies are bangers. And then, of course,
Right.
I can't say
Yeah, I
that
can't
now.
say
They're
that.
about as hit or miss as the Star Trek movie.
Give it another 20 years, I bet you can say it again. Because
Yeah.
people talk crap
see.
about Phantom
Oh.
Menace, and now they don't.
Oh, no, I
talk
definitely
crap
still
about
talk
the
crap
Phantom
about
We
it.
still do. Sorry, Zach.
When the
Thank you.
Empire Strikes
Yeah,
Back
yeah.
came out,
I tried.
I think
So
Revenge of the Sith actually gets more crap than it deserves, but Phantom Menace deserves every amount of crap that it gets.
Agree.
In
When-
every sense.
It's working.
The funny thing with
It's
Star Wars fans,
working.
they say Star Wars fans are the worst fans in the world, and that goes all the way back to when Empire Strikes Back came out.
I believe
There
you.
was at least one fanzine that shut down with the release of Empire Strikes Back because they saw that movie as being a betrayal of everything that Star Wars was.
Yep.
So they shut their doors with the release of Empire Strikes Back.
The greatest
And
of the
the
trilogy,
critics-
in my opinion.
The critics panned Empire Strikes Back when it first came out.
Mm-hmm.
20 years later, everybody hands down says it's the best Star Wars movie. I'm of the opinion that in another, well, it used to be 20 years, I'll say 15 years from now, the common consensus will be The Last Jedi is the best of the Star Wars films. Because I personally think it's
Really?
the best made. It
Sure.
is the best
That
made.
is a bold
of the
statement.
Star Wars.
That is a bold statement.
Yeah, I know. And it's not my favorite of the Star Wars movies, but I firmly
Sure.
believe it's the best made of the Star Wars movies. And I think it will be seen that way in 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
The way maybe not Phantom Menace being seen as great, but the way the prequels are so beloved by people who are of voting age these days. You know, in 15, 20 years, when the kids who were 10 to 15, when, you know, the sequel trilogy came out, when they're voting age and old enough to be president and stuff like that, you will see a marked shift in what the best Star Wars film is.
All right, we have another guest that I'm going to be bringing in here now, but I just want to say before I bring her in that, Glenn, you're right. In about 15 years, we're going to think it's the best because our memories will have been slipping by then. You, me, Matt, Bill, we're going to no longer remember with clarity anymore, and that's why The Last Jedi will be the last one. Yeah, it must be good. Okay, let's bring in Leia.
Woo! Hey, Leia.
Oh.
Sorry, I'm late.
You're not late. You have it's like
a wizard.
Team. You are always right when the time. I can't remember the quote. Now.
When you
Horrible.
But a wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
There
Exactly.
it is. There it
Exactly.
is. So with you
If
coming
you want
on
movie
now,
quotes, Daniel's
what
got you.
everybody else had done when they first came on was say, why in the world did we invite you? How do we know you? Introduce yourself and tell us anything you want.
Hi, I am Leia. I've known Jim and Zach for several years now. They've had me on. I think the first time you guys had me on was to talk The Expanse.
Yes.
Which I'm just a little bit of a fan of. I've also been on Glenn's show talking The Expanse. I've also we've talked a whole bunch of other topics. Jim, I believe you, and I don't know if Zach's been on our show, which is a Wheel of Time based show. So for anybody who's into those things, Zach, we're gonna have to get you on then.
Zach is
actually
AI.
I don't remember.
Deciphering now, you know.
Oh, you would remember. We also have a list.
You don't
somewhere
forget
that I'm
threefold
tracking.
talk. You don't.
And that was the thing. It's like I've
Threefold
been around
No.
for Threefold Talk. I don't think I've been on Threefold Talk.
Yeah. So Leia, we talked a little bit before you got on about how we're kind of happy Show Ray is jumping from one franchise to another. I'm sure that has to be a big yeah for you.
Yes. Every question, I'm like, like I wish I was on to talk about this.
There it is. There it is. Awesome. All right, our next topic then. Now that we have even more of us to chew the
Can I say
Andrew?
one last thing about Star Wars?
Do it. Go ahead.
The one thing that I really want to say is I don't know about The Last Jedi, and my only thing about that is that the new trilogy had a new problem. The original trilogy is a through line, but its story isn't fantastic. The original, or the prequel trilogy, its story is great. It actually has a better story than the original trilogy, but the acting from some of the people, and I have heard so many reports that this was Lucas's directing fault. I can't prove that because I wasn't on set, but the acting for a number of pieces of it is just so bad. But again, you can get over that with nostalgia. Some people are actually doing a great job. We're all on board to a certain degree. The new trilogy had a new problem that is harder to get around. And that is that if you watch 7 and 8 and forget that 9 exists, it's actually a pretty good set of movies. If you watch 7 and 9 and forget that 8 exists, it's actually a pretty good story and a pretty good movie. The problem comes when you watch 7, 8, and 9, because the directors and the writers did not talk to each other and made opposing decisions. And that becomes a big problem in the storytelling because it's hard to reconcile the two movies with each other. And so again, I actually really like 7 and 8 as a series, or 7 and 9 as a series. It's just an issue when you watch all three of them, which I think hampers its ability for any of the whole trilogy to be great. But if you pull out singular movies like just The Last Jedi, I agree. It can absolutely be some of the greatest movies and or some of the best produced movies. It just becomes a problem as a trilogy.
I try to forget that the Rise of Skywalker ever happened. So
Sure.
sorry,
And
what
that's
movie?
fair.
that's the one Star Wars property that I was like utterly crushed and disappointed at when I saw it. I
Yep.
mean, I've recently in the last few years watched the holiday special and had more fun watching that than the Rise of Skywalker.
That's a brutal
That's
comment.
Okay,
It's
that's a
a
bit
hard
far.
take.
That's a bit
Wow.
far.
It's
Anyway,
true.
sorry.
I
I
had
didn't
more
mean
fun
to-
watching that.
That is hyperbole.
But-
It has to be.
I didn't necessarily mean to derail it again with Star Wars. I just wanted to say that
It's
because again,
fine.
it's such a meta problem, and it's so annoying to be there. But Jim, you were gonna switch us to a new topic.
Yep. And okay, so one of our simply, which side do you fall on something here? If you could just hang out in a place, relax, have a good time, would you go with Narnia or the Shire?
Shire. Heartbeat.
All of
Shire.
Narnia or a particular place in
The
Narnia?
land of Narnia itself, not outside Narnia, but Narnia itself.
And
I'd
This
go
during
with
the
the
Ice
Shire
Queen
myself.
rule?
I think we go with the days of the High King and
Okay.
High Queen. Yeah,
Okay.
not during winter. Winter sucked.
Not during winter and not post like Horse and His Boy.
Yeah. In the
I
sweet spot.
appreciate that.
Okay.
I'm going the
Good
Shire
Narnia.
because the Shire has the same agricultural product that
I
like.
was not surprised you went there.
You
Yeah.
know,
A good
None of us
tobacco.
I would have the
yeah.
same problem Saruman had. I had a bit too much love of the halfling's pipe weed.
There's just
I mean-
something fascinating though about living in a place with all these animals that are fully anthropomorphic and
And thought.
dwarves who are, some of them are cool, some of them suck, but they're a real part of the society, and magic is a thing that's really mostly good at that point. It's a really positive. I mean, it was kind of the spot where Narnia was never that good again. That was the place. And the Shire is just a comfortable backwater country town. It's nice, it's pleasant, it's got good leaf, but that's
But
it.
wait,
It's
you know?
got
Was your
Gandalf
question-
on fireworks.
Was your question live there or go there or visit
Hang out
there or
there,
what?
be
Hang out
there,
there.
enjoy your time there. That was it. Not
So-
necessarily relocate for good, but
Okay. See, I would say if you had to move somewhere and live there, the Shire, because it's quiet and comfortable, but from there you can have adventures aplenty. And then you always can come back to the calm, comfortable Shire, provided that, Sharky hasn't gotten there ahead of you.
point.
Right.
Yep.
So live there, Shire. But the
Also, do you want to
the
be
entrance
judged by
and-
all of your neighbors for having adventures? Come on. No,
Yeah, that's true.
And
If
Harry,
you do
constantly
have
have people
adventures,
coming,
be
"Hey,
ready for your
can you get this
reputation.
off the shelf for me? Because they're all so blooming short.
Mine comes down to who would I rather hang out with, Samwise Gamgee or Mr. Tumnus? Samwise,
Sam.
all the way.
Yeah.
So I'm hanging out with Sam.
See, I'm kind of opposite of Eric. Like, I think I'd prefer to, if I was just to visit a place, I would just visit the Shire just because it is comfy, cozy. But if I was to relocate to somewhere, it would be Narnia, because then, kind of for the same reasons, but a little different. Like, you have that whole area of Narnia to explore, kind of a hybrid of what Eric and Jem said. So, like, there's all the animals and all the creatures, the magic. So just I feel like for living, Narnia would provide a lot more entertainment. I think I'd get really the Shire it's an adorable little town to go visit, sit and drink a mug of ale and laugh at the the shenanigans of the locals,
Yeah.
but partake in that tobacco, but then go home to Narnia and shoot my bow and arrow and ride my horses and go visit all my animal friends and perform
And
whatever
remember,
variants of
Narnia,
magic.
They were
If-
more than
if-
just the animals. There was a lot of
Oh
mythological
yeah.
beings that are part of it. You can go
Yeah.
shooting with the centaurs.
Oh,
know,
exactly. Yeah.
So much there.
If it was a question of where to move, I would definitely have to do some research because there's one key factor that a place I move would have to have, and that's called good sanitation. And I don't think either the Shire or Narnia really has much in the way of good
I don't
sanitation.
think either of those places have bathrooms.
I'm sure they both
They
have
just
indoor
no, it's
plumbing.
not even
It's just
talked about.
not
They
talked
don't have
about.
bodily
I'm
functions.
sure they both have outhouse style things.
Everybody
Yeah.
poops, Jim. Everybody.
Yeah, but
poops.
nobody poops in fantasy.
Not, especially
I've
in
noticed that.
1950s
Well, no,
fantasy.
in Grimdark, because they get killed on the toilet.
Yeah.
There is pooping in the Lost
Technically,
Metal.
Tywin
There's
Lannister.
definitively pooping there.
Yeah, there you go. I was going to say
Tywin
Lannister
Lannister
gets
shits
killed on the
gold.
toilet.
See?
Uh,
Yeah. All right. Anyone else with a thought on Narnia and Shire? Zach, it looks like you're
I mean,
you're
at
deep
the
in
end of the day,
population. You got
it
something?
comes down to I think the Shire knows how to do potatoes better. So I think that's what I'm down
Potato.
for.
Taters.
Potato.
You know, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew. It's good.
Potatoes.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, let's move on to the next question we can argue about and debate. What has been the best sci-fi TV show? I mean, we got The Expanse, we've got Doctor Who, we've got Battlestar Galactica. We've got other choices. Where do you fall? Which one is your best?
Best or favorite?
I
Correct.
said best.
Yeah.
I did say best. Still hard to define what makes something the
Wow.
best. It's all subjective, but
I would say
See.
that since it's literally in my like top 3 most favorite TV shows in just period, I would say best goes to Battlestar Galactica. I would say most entertaining and most enjoyable is actually Stargate SG-1 for me.
oh, whoop, whoop, whoop.
Good.
Got all of those.
Valid.
Yeah.
But I think best done and like best put together is Battlestar.
I started rewatching SG1. The little size of the screen again. This is before high def. I was like, oh my, this
Right?
is terrible. Yeah. The story's still
yet-
great, but
See,
oh.
Yet.
I
My
gotta go Fringe.
Ooh.
French,
Oh.
Fringe
Yeah.
is my absolute favorite. So I'm going Fringe. Love
That's
that.
a
My
good
number
answer.
2, my number 1 TV show is weirdly not science fiction or fantasy at all. But my number 2 rank has always been a tie between Babylon 5 and Battlestar Galactica, the reboot.
Ooh. Babylon 5.
And it's I really have a hard time choosing between the two because BSG had the benefit of being much more recent and made with better technology and more money. Babylon 5 was made with 90s technology and not much money at all, even though they were the first show to do entirely CG animation for their space combat. But it's probably, in my opinion, the best story told, the best science fiction story told on television. So I might have to lean towards Babylon 5 just slightly on this one over BSG. Granted, Stargate franchise is really awesome, especially Stargate Universe, my favorite of those 3.
Really?
But Stargate is a really good competition for it. But yeah, I'm gonna go Babylon 5.
What
And yes,
impresses
Stargate
me
Universe is my favorite.
about
of the 3
Battlestar
shows.
Galactica, you mentioned, of course, that it was a little later than Babylon 5, but it's still, debuted 20 years ago.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's crazy.
And it's amazing how well it's held up.
It's
You go
held up
back and
so
watch it,
well.
and it's like it's current. It's still great technology. What's on the
CG.
screen
So
blows
say
you
we
away.
all.
The story is still so relevant and gritty, and yeah,
Mhm.
Notably, when you say
For that
20
matter,
years ago,
this-
you're talking about the remake, not
yes,
the
Correct.
original.
oh yes,
Not
we
the
are
ori-
not
not the
talking the original.
1970s.
The
Which
same
also
can be said of the
technically was
CG for
adorable.
Firefly.
Also,
It-
I was gonna say actually, shows that should definitely get honorable mention, but they never actually really got to take off. Battlestar Galactica gave us Caprica, which was
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
an amazing show
Excellent show.
that just got
And a brilliant
shit canned.
soundtrack.
right.
Yeah, and Carrie's pulled
soundtrack
up
from
another
the
one
crew is
of
amazing.
another one that
And Firefly.
started and
Firefly.
yeah.
That also
Yeah.
just
Didn't get a
never
chance.
really got a
Farscape
chance.
was like that. Yeah.
Farscape
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Farscape, though, I finished watching Farscape, and 3 weeks later, I couldn't remember anything.
Interesting.
And that's
I
not
think that
from
has
the
to
weed I
do with the
smoked.
halfling's
That's
leaf,
the
my
leaf
friend.
again, the halfling leaf, Glenn.
Yeah.
I remember all these other shows fine. It's just Farscape kind of just like whoosh,
It's also
slipped out
interesting
of my
because
head.
there was a great show, Warehouse
13.
Warehouse
13.
13.
Warehouse
Yes.
13.
Yes.
That was so
Same
much
universe
fun, and
as
it just
Eureka.
got
And
it
yeah,
just
Eureka and
never
Elvis.
went anywhere.
Yeah.
Like it was so fun, but it was
It had
so
ideas,
procedural
and then
that
it-
it never actually did anything more.
Yeah.
Eric, I know you don't do as much sci-fi, but any takes on any of
Okay.
these?
No, I'm completely lost here. I just don't watch much TV as a whole.
Fair.
So some of these words sound like words that are real words to me, but I think if it counts, probably the last show format that was anything like sci-fi or fantasy was The Mandalorian. That's probably the last
Ooh,
show
that's a
I
good
watched.
one.
So
Perhaps the best that Disney has put out on TV.
Andor.
I
I
enjoyed
think
that
Andor
one.
tops it.
Andor was also really good.
I've watched it.
I never really got. I mean, I watched Andor, but I didn't resound to it the way I did The Mandalorian. I
Right.
just liked it better. That's all.
Heard?
So
Mando
one-
does have this guy. So,
Yeah.
How could you?
Leia, go ahead.
I wouldn't really like. I have a hard time characterizing. Jim, you had mentioned Doctor Who. Like, I always like put that more in the fantasy, even though it's like some weird alien space technology that does magic-y looking things. There is a spinoff, and I was just trying to look up
Torchwood.
Torchwood. Yes,
Yep.
I love
Oh.
freaking love Torchwood. The first two
Catherine
seasons are
Shannon.
kind of like cutesy, more in the line of
It'll-
Doctor Who, where they go off on singular episodic adventures. But the last two seasons are each individual continuing running stories where they are going and trying to solve mystery, much more aligned to the type of TV that we watch today. And I thought those were really well done. And it's got one of my favorite Doctor Who characters, the the ageless captain,
Mhm.
who
Captain
seems to
Harkness.
never die.
Captain Jack.
Yes, I love him
Captain
so
Jack.
much. Oh my gosh, I would love to like
This
just
may
live
be a
in his-
contentious take, but Torchwood to Doctor Who, in my opinion, is what Angel was to Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Ooh,
Um,
no, that's
just
not. That's not bad.
Certifiably.
it works.
in
Yeah,
a
but
good
I
way
enjoy
or a
it.
bad
In a
way.
good way.
An off that
In a
really
good
kind of
way.
goes beyond in some
Keep in
very
mind,
cool ways.
I do prefer Doctor Who, but I by far preferred Angel over Buffy.
Yeah.
I always thought it was funny. I watched all of
Yeah.
Torchwood before ever watching Doctor Who. I had tried Doctor Who as a kid and didn't like it. I got all the way through Torchwood, and a friend says, "You need to watch Doctor Who." And I'm like, I just didn't like it. And he made me watch Blink, and I haven't looked back.
Ooh.
It's fair.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I enjoy. I'm getting called out in the chat for my take on Andor. That's pretty good.
It's always going to
I'm with
happen.
Carrie.
Anytime you have opinions, somebody's going to
How
call you
dare
out on
you,
it.
sir?
Love you,
Now-
Gary.
Yeah. How dare
my
you.
opinions on things will change and vary. So ask me tomorrow, and I'll probably agree with one of you on what I think the best sci-fi show is. But I'm going to bring one that we haven't talked about yet,
Okay.
because I think when we talk best, it should be acknowledged, and that's Westworld.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Ooh.
world.
I thought you were
Yeah.
going to say Blake 7.
It's got a lot to say.
It does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, again, that one
This
also
was
very
interesting.
much benefits from almost all of the ones that we've talked
Oh,
about
absolutely.
so far. Came
Right.
out 20 years ago, and that one came out like
Mhm.
5 years ago.
But that doesn't
But-
necessarily make it worse.
No. I'm
No.
not saying worse at all. I'm
no.
just saying it has the benefit of, some of these things that the others didn't have access to.
Mhm.
But I agree.
Specifically the money. So
Also true.
having
I-
HBO back.
Yeah, the
it.
budget.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I mean, it's so sad because this is so many different series that this is true of.
Yeah.
But I want that feeling that I got at the end of season 1 of Westworld every time I watch a show, and it's just not possible
Yeah.
to do that,
yeah.
Mhm.
and it makes me sad.
Truth. We haven't. Nobody's really made a case to argue for The Expanse as the best one, but I do love The
it's my
Expanse.
always second place, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
it is
especially
top
I
3
think
every time.
I think-
always the bridesmaid.
I think the the only downside of The Expanse was not finishing this TV series in spite of having the book series finished and teasing all of these other storylines that were continuing. Like the first, oh gosh, how many seasons was it? 7. So the first 6 seasons of The Expanse were phenomenal. They followed very closely with the books, probably closer than any other TV series that I've ever seen. But they knowing that they ended it, they were going to end it, they added all this extra stuff in and didn't like tightly wrap it up. They could have very tightly wrapped it up and they just didn't. So that, especially, it wasn't even just the last couple of episodes, like the entire last season. It was just like, you're getting it. How are you going to conclude this satisfactorily, having made these editorial choices by adding these storylines in? So I think like that last season kind of kills it for me.
Now they may just be, adding in real time the 30-year time jump, and so we'll get the rest of the series.
I'm hoping that they do. Maybe like I'd be totally fine with that. But
I'd be down.
That'd be great.
I'd be
Twin
totally
Peaks,
down with
The
that.
Expanse.
Totally down with that. I mean, we've got Beetlejuice 30 years later.
Right.
I mean, how many other shows do we have the 30 years later where they're like, okay, everybody's old enough. We've kind of all the Jurassic Park. They brought back all the original characters in the latest Jurassic
They
Park.
won't have
all the
to
ones
truly
that
wait
would come
30
back.
years because they don't age as quickly, so they can wait maybe 15 years and bring the same actors back and do it, and it'll be beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, I've got another trivia question for us.
Glenn,
You're muted, Glenn.
Yeah.
I see that. I muted myself when I went to the bathroom. Sorry.
You know what?
We
Thank you.
appreciate
I
that.
appreciate it.
Wholeheartedly.
Okay, this one, come on, this one's easy unless you somehow never watched the franchise. But in Harry Potter, what's the name of the potion that allows someone to assume another person's form?
Polyjuice.
Polyjuice.
There,
I went-
all across the screen. Thank you.
I wouldn't have known that.
Polyjuice. All right. Different kind of question then to debate here. When you think about your preference for fantasy and the style of books that you want to get into, do you prefer more of the high fantasy kingdoms or the gritty dark fantasy cities? Which kind of settings and style do you prefer?
Depends on my mood.
Choice.
Yes.
Probably depends on my
The answer is
mood.
What she said.
So, like, I love all those sci-fi fantasies, but like, if I'm in a happy-go-lucky mood, I'm gonna want something a little more kitschy and fantastical. Or if I'm just like pissed off at the world, then I'm gonna want those darker, grittier. And I just did a reread leading up to Wind and Truth, and some books that I had previously had an opinion about based off of where I was in life. It was a very different experience. And I find that like I have typically done a annual Wheel of Time reread, and I do find that like my mood does affect those rereads. So like I know for a fact, like having a baseline, like where I am emotionally definitely affects
Makes sense.
what I want to read and how I interpret it.
I tend to be the type of person who is pretty much always up here. I'm an optimist. I'm always positive. I'm smiling all the time. It's ridiculous.
Can
So,
confirm.
I don't tend to have highs and lows, but I have, therefore, the experience right now where just loving life, doing my thing, and I'm reading Wind and Truth and Joe Abercrombie's Age of Madness at the same time. Okay, one I'm reading in print, the other I'm listening to. And wow, I have to admit, Abercrombie is where I'm having more fun. So the darker, grittier stuff, and just his writing style is totally, I'm loving it. Where I gotta admit, Wind and Truth right now, I'm not liking this one as much as the previous Stormlight Archive book.
Got a lot of emotional trauma.
Different
in it. Like,
writing
every
style
single
is in there.
emotional trauma.
Yeah,
See,
so I think I'm leaning towards the darker, grittier stuff. What do you guys think? Others?
I mean, depending on how you connect to Wind and Truth, it's pretty dark and emotional and gritty in and of itself.
Yeah.
I think you just don't like that as series as much as I do. Like,
Fair.
you haven't finished it. I have. There's a reason.
I'm on day 3. Day 3. I'm still
Oh, you got
How?
so much. Oh my
How?
god.
Okay, leaving that be for now.
I'm on book 3.
I'm on the second book, and I'm like,
Okay.
And we
several
won't
chapters
holding
in.
off.
Everyone's
any of the
cup of
content of
tea.
Wind and Truth right now.
It
'Cause,
is
oh my
fine.
God, spoil this
I'm
for
holding
some
off on Wind and Truth because I'm just not in a mood for the more magical side of fantasy. I've been a very science fiction mood for the last year and a half, 2 years. And I'm very much a mood reader. If I'm not in the mood to read something, like if I'm not in the mood for science fiction, it's going to be real hard to get me to read science fiction unless I'm reading it for like one of my channels. Like, oh, I got to read The Expanse book 4 because we're talking about that starting in January, But I've mostly been sticking to the science fiction for the last year or so. But so I have a hard time. It's all, like Leia said, it's all mood based for me,
Some days I want Douglas Adams, and some days I want Malazan. So, just depending on where I am on that day, it could be either or in between. So I love both. Honestly, they have their places in my heart. So
we can be so thankful there is so much variety out there.
yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Maybe we
have
can
those
go back
options.
and forth.
Yeah, I'm
Daniel, go ahead.
definitely one of those people who I don't actually really like gritty characters. I actually really enjoy in settings where the whole setting isn't gritty. I am very much not a grim dark or like a Malazan or anything like that. Stories that are set in those things need to overcome that for me rather than actually like that is a selling point.
Okay.
Like Mistborn, I really enjoyed the magic system and I really enjoyed the characters. And I was like, I wish this was set differently because I don't love the and part of it might even just be my imagination because I imagine vividly and brightly, which means that if you have an entire setting where there's just ash covering the entire sun most of the time, it makes it difficult for me to imagine that because I'm like, oh yeah, they're running around in sunlight and doing this, and then I'm like, oh yeah, the ash is covering all of that. That's not happening at all. Like, but yeah, I'm definitely one of the people who's very much like bright and happy and fun settings with characters that have rough times because I like when there's conflict because non-conflict is boring, but it's like conflict in that bright setting versus the setting being so dark that everybody's just like, I mean, just add it to the list of shit that's going on in my life because everything sucks all the time, and you're like, yep, heard, okay.
There's something to be said for me that sometimes grimdark is nice for that reason, because even if everything sucks all the time, it could be worse. It could be this.
There you go. See? It could be worse. Look at that. Yeah.
There is one aspect in where I could differentiate one that I would like over the other, whether I would like the adventuring out in the countryside story or the adventuring in the city with the politics and intrigue and all that, is if I was gaming. Not video game, but like role-playing, tabletop or live action. I've got a lot of experience playing live action Vampire, which is all a politics game. It's all basically city. So my tendency would be, if I was going to game something, I would totally be all about the city, gritty, intrigue, politics, backstabbing, cloak and dagger type stuff. Way over the going off and adventuring in a dungeon or in the wilderness. So when it comes to gaming, I could differentiate, but I can't split the two and decide one way or the other for reading.
Okay.
It's just a different entertainment form.
Eric, as a writer, I am curious, do you have, when you're thinking of stories and things like that, do you have one or the other that you think is more fun to write in or imagine in? Or is it kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other? It depends on the characters.
I think I'm with you and Jim. I tend to like brighter, happier settings and interesting things happening in those settings. I mean, my glib answer for Jim's question was going to be there's a Stephen King book for every mood.
Yeah, there is.
And there is.
True. It is
There
true.
is. But tell me your mood, and I can give you the book. So.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah,
Stephen King mood ring? What?
Yeah, I don't like. I mean, I don't know if I've read Grimdark, really. But in
know
like
if you did.
movies, yeah, okay, then I haven't.
It's pretty brutal.
But I would say mood wise, I'm opposite of Leia, of you, Leia. Like when I don't want to watch scary or dark or gritty movies if I'm already in a bad mood, because it takes me worse. When I'm in a good mood, I want a good scary movie, and when I'm in a bad mood, I want the
It's a
first or
Wonderful
second
Life.
Harry Potter, or something fun and light.
So fun
Okay.
fact, they actually did a study through decades on musicals. So I know that this is not necessarily in the same exact wheelhouse, and it's definitely a different genre. So I don't know whether it translates to books or films or anything like that. But they noticed this trend that when, especially the US, because a lot of them have been written by US citizens at the time that they were written, is that when things are going well in the country, that's when you get a lot of these like darker, grittier, more sort of like human study kind of musicals, where it's more of a look into like, oh, what makes people tick, or what's going on with this, or things like that. And when things are going badly, like the Great Depression, for example, is a great, like, it just, once that happened, it just dipped everything that was written during the Great Depression is all these like super lighthearted romps, like Oklahoma and Mary Poppins and things like that, that really, like, I'm not saying they don't have some deeper meanings in them, but really it's just like, hey, can we just like sing some songs and feel good right now? Because like life sucks.
Life sucks.
So
Look, at the end of the day, during the Great Depression, people wrote things and made things to give a little bit of light, a little bit of sunshine. Then we got out of the Great Depression and everyone started writing about the Great Depression.
Also true.
Grapes of Wrath.
Grapes of Wrath,
Yeah.
Mice and
Ending.
Men,
How many of us
Really
were
heavy
scarred
hitting
by
stuff.
Grapes of Wrath in high school?
Well,
never had to read
before
it.
high school, but yeah.
I think of
Mine
Mice
was the
and
lucky
Men
one.
hurt me more.
Okay.
Mice and Men hurt.
Oh, ow. Okay.
Fair.
Ow,
Fine.
why?
I got lucky, never had to read Grapes of Wrath. So
Now, I will toss out here, Grimdark is definitely not for everyone, but there is definitely gritty, dark fantasy that isn't Grimdark.
Correct.
You know,
Right.
Grimdark, everyone who possibly could be screwed over will be screwed over. Okay, and no good
Except
the
for the
people will
worst
punish.
possible
Horrible.
people.
Okay, but
Yeah.
dark fantasy is just, it's a grittier, darker place, but you can still have positive outcomes. You can still have people who aspire for more for good reasons, not just because they're evil deep down on the inside. No, so there's balances. I'll point to on my screen here, way in the corner, For a Few Days More is an independent one by ZB Steele, and it's like Grimdark Light. I mean, it's in the Grimdark lane. It's also slightly in the Western
Grimdark
lane,
Gray.
but it doesn't go all in with Grimdark, and it's a
Grim
quick read,
Shadowy?
it's a fun story.
There we go.
50
But it's
Shades
more
of
dark.
Grimdark.
Dim.
There's a little Stephen Kingish
Grimdark.
to it, Eric. With Dark Tower and westerns and stuff. Anyways, I just
Yeah,
throw that out there. I really
That's
enjoyed that
funny.
book.
There is a survivor type for everybody. Anybody who's read that Stephen King story knows what I'm talking
Yes.
about. There's a survivor type for everybody.
There you go. Okay, next trivia question. Get ready for it. This is the one, Zach, I'm expecting you to get,
Nope.
if no one else. The rest of you might. I don't know. What is the name of the dragon ridden by Aragon in the inheritance cycle?
Saphira.
Saphira, yeah.
Okay, but Zach won. Good job.
You did. Yeah.
I
you
got
did.
I got what I got what was I got my bone, the one that was thrown to me.
That's for you. Bill was right there behind you. I would not have. I've never read these. I didn't.
It's a great book
Never read
series.
them either.
I've read the
It's-
first one, and it's on my list to read in this upcoming year. So
There you go.
Someday
One
they'll
was
make
good.
a movie.
2 was great. 3, got a little bogged down on itself, and
Yeah.
4 didn't stick the landing I wanted it to,
Ooh,
but was still
all right.
okay.
The following book, though, Murtaugh, is
that good?
amazing.
Is it?
Okay, I haven't read it yet.
It's
partially 'cause
everything
Same.
you
it's
wanted
been a
and
while.
didn't get
Oh,
Okay,
I'm-
okay.
I'm 50-50
in
on the books
Murtaugh.
by
I'm
him.
just
I
telling
read.
you, give it a shot. He's grown up, so his style has changed.
Keep in mind, he wrote the first book
Yeah.
when he was like, what, 13, 14?
16.
Yeah, 13.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yep.
Wow, I didn't
Yeah.
know
He was
that.
like
Really
14.
young.
I've
That's-
only read 2 books by him, Sleeping in a Sea of Stars, and then I think Fractal Noise or something like that. It was like a spin-off from that new science fiction setting.
Mhm.
And one book was good, and the other book, I hated every second of it. So,
Oh,
Very hit or miss then.
yeah.
I feel like I need to
I
give
plan
him
on
another
reading
shot.
Well, there
I
you
plan
go.
on reading his
Probably
Aragon
like his
stuff at some
Eric.
point,
You really
though.
would.
Well, I read Aragon, and my arrogant writer self was like, "This is just a kid who discovered a bunch
Oh,
of
you
big
got
words and
judgy.
wrote way too many of them." Stop.
I pointed things over to Eric, and he reads them, and sometimes he loves them, and sometimes
Ah.
it's trash because he looks with author eyes. It's
Eric,
true.
as a kid who was reading it, as he discovered way too many big words from his father,
words.
I enjoyed it.
You were like, "Ooh, all the big words. They're right here."
well, and then
We
again,
won't discuss
as-
the movie they made. We
Yeah.
will not discuss
What
the
someday
movie?
they'll make a movie.
90
and
movie wasn't very good.
they haven't yet.
Ugh.
It doesn't exist. I don't know what you're
They're
talking
working on a TV series with
Are they?
Pelini actually involved. So
Thank goodness he's
so that has
finally
a
in.
better
we
chance.
have hope.
You know, it's like Percy Jackson. There was a movie that we don't talk about, and
There
now
are 2
there's a
movies.
show.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
there
we
have
definitely
been
don't
Sea
talk
of
about the
Monsters
second one.
exists as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I actually also agree very much with what Zach said to a certain degree, Eric. The first one feels very much like a kid wrote it. By the time that you get to the third one, it no longer feels that way. It very much he
Right.
grew
Found his voice.
a ton.
Okay.
Even through just the first 2 books.
You see him grow as a
And-
writer.
You do. And it's a little bit humorous because this is a little bit Harry Potter also had a little bit of that problem, that J.K. Rowling in the very first book, she's not a bad writer, but she's not a good writer either. She has a great idea and she writes it passively.
I see what you're doing, Jim.
Yeah, you
And
see-
then you get to the end of the books and Deathly Hallows is actually really pretty well written.
Yeah.
And then you get to the fight scene between Voldemort and Harry.
Wait, what?
And it is sorry, spoiler alert. Yeah.
Spoilers.
and-
great. I got to put a spoiler bar for Harry Potter on here now.
Great.
Scene in the books is so barely edited from what she wrote at the very beginning as like a, I'm going to bookend my series, figure out the beginning and end. And it sounds like it's from the first book again. And you're just like, what happened? Like, where is any of the growth that you have as a writer through all of these books? Whereas Paolini, for example, like, again, when you get to the fourth book, it really just feels the whole way through like he's grown. And I respectfully disagree with Zach's opinion about
That's
the
fair.
ending of it.
Ooh.
I actually think it was great, but again, I very much respect his opinion about it because I can see.
It's okay.
You
I
very
don't
much
respect
think
my
it was
opinion
right.
about it because I read it at a point where I was still. It's before what I consider I'm reading as an adult now. Period.
Fair enough.
And so, like, I don't think my perspective on things was at the point where I usually place things now. And so I wonder if I read it now, I would have a very different opinion.
If your TBR was not so large, I would recommend reading it again. That being said, I would probably skip it for a while and read other new things. But yes, I do actually think that the last book is actually quite good. And I think that it does a pretty good job with the story. But again, it is not a universally felt belief that Zach is on the wrong side of. It's definitely, there are a lot of opinions about the book.
It's funny though. There is a trend with authors as they move into their career, as they get more, find their voice and stuff of what happens to their books. And
the book
Eric, his
size?
books demonstrate the same thing because okay, here's the first book,
Mhm.
okay, and then here's the second book.
Mhm.
Notice there. Oh,
Mhm.
wait.
And
Here's the third book.
Mhm.
Oh,
And it is the
Eric,
best,
you learned
but look
more
at the
big
size
words.
of what happens
But so
here,
many
man.
big words in there. No, I totally agree. That's why I want to keep reading them, because I mean, I was quite a bit younger when I read Aragon 2, and I was like, this is too much pages. I don't have time for all this. But I love I mean, you know, I love Stephen King. He's been writing for 50 years. It's really cool to see an author grow and change. And you know, I guess my one of my nightmares would be what King often says, which is like, it's pretty sad when people say your best stuff you wrote like 40 years ago. You know,
Oh yeah.
like people are like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, The Stand, and he's like, that was 1978. People, I've written 50
Still my
books since
favorite.
then. So
Yeah.
yeah, you want to grow, and it's fun to see that growth in an author, and it's fun to see the growth in yourself too, if you're trying to write, because it's a hard thing. I mean, probably every author at some point has been like, I have this here, I did this, it's crap. What happened? So it's an art form for sure, and it's neat to see people grow in their art.
Totally. We have some great thinkers here. You guys are having deep conversations. I'm loving it. I mean, some of it's, yeah, just silly, but we're enjoying this. So I have a question to toss out at you that I think I want to hear what you think, what your thoughts are. So it's a little deeper. Does modern fantasy fiction overshadow the classics of fantasy fiction, or does it truly build on the legacy of what came before? What do you think? Zach, facilitate. I gotta go use the restroom.
What do you mean by modern? Just curious.
Yeah, where is the line for modern? I think that's honestly, actually, possibly a good place to start.
if I could jump in real quick, I have to
Yeah.
run and pick my son up from work. Congratulations, guys.
See the
Again, congrats on 2000. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate the
Absolutely.
discussion, everyone. Eric, it was a pleasure to meet you.
Great
Daniel,
to meet
good
you.
to see you. Leia, good to see you. Glenn,
Always good to see you.
yeah, see each other all the time.
love you.
Thanks very much, Bill. You
Love
take
you
care,
guys.
okay?
Love you, bro.
Okay.
See you later.
I miss him already.
Aw.
Well, I would possibly contend, if we're talking classic versus modern, that Tolkien kind of capstoned what we would call the classic era.
Mhm.
And then from there, because he was really one of the most recent prolific writers. So you've got things like Thousand Leagues Under the Sea, War Against the Worlds. Like there's several older pieces of work. You've got Frankenstein, and these are more gearing towards the sci-fi lane versus the fantasy. But there are definitely fantastical works that are older than what Tolkien did. But Tolkien, I feel like, capstoned where the classical era, in my opinion, and I'm happy to hear what y'all think, he's the capstone of what we could possibly define as the classical era. And then from Tolkien on, because Tolkien wrote after World War II, so there was a big shift in the world, not just in writing what was being published, the styles of writing. He kind of ends. He kind of is a nice place, clean place to bookend, and I'm sure this could be a conversation that could go on forever. I'm sure people could debate this, but my recommendation for the purpose of this conversation would put Tolkien as the capstone for the classical era, and then everything after that is contemporary, modern.
See, my question is the Wheel of Time modern or old school?
Yes,
because it
modern.
started
Modern.
old school, it finished modern, but there really is a difference. I mean, you look at the fantasy you get through Tolkien up until like the 70s, and you get it's a very different feel than what you get when you start in the late 70s and then the 80s with like Raymond E. Feist and Tad Williams and all these other, and Terry Brooks even. And then we get that for about a decade or two, and then we get the introduction of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. and things start to change again. So I'm like, where, Jim, would you call that cutoff for modern and not? Because that's
there's almost really 3 eras.
Almost.
Yeah.
You've got the classical, you've got the I need a middle name, I don't know, and then you've got the modern. But there is a shift that
the
happens
adolescence.
probably through the 90s
Here's
and
the-
into the beginning of the aughts before we really move into what is more modern fantasy now.
We are weirdly in a position on this show to have names for those eras. It's the classical era, the Jim era, and the Zach era.
You're not
That
wrong.
works.
Okay, I like that.
See, I was
Daniel,
gonna
go,
say
jump
maybe-
in.
It's also interesting because you like obviously you can't really cut it off in years, not truly, because
Right.
again, it's event based. Because really, a ton of those classics really stand the test of time because they were fully published and they were distributed, and they really got into a ton of hands as far as books and whatnot are concerned at the time. And then you get into the age of, being able to independently publish, but not yet into the tech boom. Once you hit that tech boom, we just have so much content.
So much.
And like, again, we're sitting here talking about having TBRs that are insanely long. And I'm not saying that people in the 1940s didn't have plenty to read. Their TBRs were absolutely possible to be too long for them to get to. But at the same time, it's not the same level of exponential that it is now. Like you could literally sit down and read or watch or, whatever media you are trying to take in right now and do it for your entire life without stopping.
Oh,
and
that's
you
a dream.
still would never even hit the amount.
Yeah.
I think somebody did a study and it'd be like, if you just took like actual published works, like not fan fiction, not like other things and blah, blah, blah. If you just took actual published works, you'd get to like 4% of everything that's out there if you did it for like the next 80 years.
Yep.
Mhm.
And again, that's not even counting everything that would then come out during the time that you're doing it. It's just currently put out their work. And so again, that becomes then the question as well of like, what starts the Jim era, what starts the Zach era, what really goes back to sort of the classics.
Yeah. On your point there with the TBRs and how much is coming out, I do have an episode coming out in a couple days where I just review the best of what I can't speak. I review what I tried to get through, my goals in 2024, and then look ahead to 2025. But it gave me a touchstone. When I did the episode like that a year ago, I had a TBR of a little over 1,300 books. I read nearly 100 books this year, and yet my TBR is now over 1,500. It's like, what the heck? Yeah.
Please tell me you have an Excel spreadsheet for your TBR.
I do.
He does.
I do.
It's beautiful.
I love it and I hate it.
Yeah, beautiful. It is. It's so helpful.
So big.
I refuse to write down a TBR because then it'll just get too long and I'll feel like I'm stuck into having to read or listen to this book at this time. I go by.
I refuse to
all
order
the
my
time.
TBR. I have roughly like 100 books that are planned of, I'm gonna for sure getting to these, but I refuse to order it until at least I've bought it. If I have the book, then I'll decide when I'll read it more.
Once something lands on my TBR, see, now it has a shot. Okay, I may read it someday, even if it's number 1,512. I might get in the mood and go, "Hey, your turn." If it's not on there,
This become an interesting sub question, TBR, because I'm like Glenn. Like I don't do a TBR because then it feels like school, like for a book report. But also, then I get into, well, Jim already knows this, what trouble I get into. I'll just be like, finish something, what to read. Well, I'll just pick a Stephen King I really like and do that again. So I don't have a TBR on purpose for the same exact reason you said, Glenn. but also I could probably use a TBR to help me when I finish a book and I don't know what to do.
There you go. Now,
Anyway,
when we were
derailed.
trying to delineate classics, Jim era, Zach
Contemporary.
era,
Oh yeah, we ignored the question.
We got bogged down on like the definition of the question.
The
Like we
line
had
of-
questions about the
the
question.
line of where that is, I think, differs a little bit, though, in that from what part of what was being said when I got back into the conversation, that there's a lot of the fantasy that's newer than Tolkien, but is still Tolkien-esque.
Sure.
It still follows those basic patterns and tropes that I still consider classic then.
Sure.
Terry
So when we
Brooks.
talk about, even though some of them really go on for decades, like Shannara, it's a classic style of fantasy.
You mean Shannara?
No.
But I don't think this. I don't think.
Okay, you
I
are the
don't think
weakest
that
link.
pattern.
Goodbye.
I don't think that pattern.
It's
is
been
what
fun, guys.
defines them
Thank you
as
so much.
classics. So I think it's more the writing style and how it's composed and when it's composed, because you can see a lot of the same themes in fantasy books all the way up through the classics, the Gem, and the Zach era. So like fantasy does kind of at its core have kind of a pseudo cookie cutter format to it. So you've got the hero, you've got the bad guy, you've got some sort of, like, if we're talking fantasy, some sort of magical system in it. And hypothetically at the end, they're going to conquer the bad guy and go through some sort of journey. So like that is a classic, like let me not use the word classic, a typical, air quotes, typical fantasy story. Yep. So, and you can even see that if you're stretching to Glenn's definition of even sci-fi is fantastical, like there is that same, like most books do have, when you get down to the core of them, that same format. So I don't think you can define classical by that definition of the cookie cutter. So again, that's why I was saying Tolkien kind of bookends, especially because of the prose that he used. He uses a lot more of that old world prose.
And archaic.
Yeah, not archaic, but old world. So like where some people, contemporary people, have problems reading it because they're not used to reading. They haven't read Jane Austen, so they're not used to that.
That's archaic right there. But
Yeah,
I would call
that too,
Tolkien's
for
writing
sure.
style a little archaic, though.
Mm-hmm.
I
mean, look
listened
at
to
Christmas
Return
Carol.
of the King
Christmas Carol is fantastical, and it's written in that old world, like that, which was contemporary at its time, but we have aged out of that writing style, and I think
archaic,
that's why
I'm not using archaic as like a judgment call, saying it because it's archaic, it's bad. It's just, it's an older style of prose, and especially Tolkien. I mean, going from all the more modern stuff I was listening to this year and then listening to Andy Serkis read The Return of the King, I was just like, wow, this is some old way of using the English language.
Yes.
And I can understand why so many people, Zach's generation, sorry to hit your generation, Zach.
No, hate on me.
Somebody your generation refused to read Tolkien or tried and just can't. There's a lot.
It's a valid thing. I think Tolkien actually gets almost far enough back where the hardest part for me is the language, but it's far enough back that it's starting to get to where it's like, no, I understand, I appreciate it for what it is, but I'm also not going to read a lot of books that talk like that. I'll read that. I'll go even older and weirder and go read the Canterbury Tales, but I'm not going to read a lot of things that talk in the same way, that write the same way. And there is a style that was often in like the 70s, 80s, early 90s, and a way of talking in prose that was very popular that doesn't really appeal to me. And so if I pick up a book, I can usually tell, does this feel like this era? Or I get surprised sometimes. I pick up the first book of Feist's Rift War and I go, this feels more modern written.
Yeah, I was just going to use Feist as an example that, his language is very, very modern, like, and the attitudes that characters have often represent, a bit more of a modern attitude. I mean, yeah, he's not great with writing female characters, but sexism doesn't really exist in the Feist books. There's no strong demarcation between this is male roles and female roles like you get in most fantasy. Feist is pretty cool about that. But yeah, he's definitely the person I was going to use for an example of more modern language used in fantasy, and it can be weird at times.
So, Zach, I have a question for you. Because one thing I've started to notice is what is a lot of the books that I read that are in the Zach era are very POV focused. So you've got POV centric sections where a lot of the books that I read that are in the Gem era but post Tolkien kind of bounce back and forth. So you're shifting between
Different
POV, so they're not quite cleanly sectioned off, or they're really truly third person. So I don't know if that's something that anybody else has noticed. And like, again, I was specifically asking Zach because maybe you'd be more cognizant of that.
I agree and think, especially when we get into some more of the like romantasy or the popular on Book Talk books, you get things that are almost entirely a singular protagonist POV, which wasn't necessarily what you would find in more of the Gem era classic epic fantasy, at least. And in modern epic fantasy, I think you still get a lot of the differentiation. You get some of that different demarcation, but there's so much out there that is more individual focused. Honestly, I think the prose kind of suffers from that sometimes, but I do tend to agree to a certain extent. Daniel, you've had your hand up forever. I feel I've never been a teacher, but I got to call on you.
Good boy, Daniel. Good boy.
I really appreciate the conversation is what this question was about. I did want to, at some point, bring it back to Jim and ask you the question. We've now had a bunch of definitions of sort of what you could use as an opportunity to say, to take the original question that you had and actually define it enough to re-ask the question.
Yeah, because I don't remember the question.
If you care about the answer anymore, or whether this was just an opportunity
been a great
for
conversation.
us to converse.
But we can bring it to there. The point really was, does modern fantasy, is it built on the tradition of the past, or is it overshadowing the past? Because I know Zach has had a point at times when we've had dialogue about things, not necessarily appreciating some of the older stuff, feeling it's old, it's dated, it's not holding up to what is around now, which is kind of the inspiration of the question.
Yeah, let me throw down my gauntlet.
Ooh.
Uh-oh.
We stand on the shoulders of giants. That is 100% true, and I will live and die by that. I appreciate things that are older. Not everything that is older is a giant.
Correct. Oh. Or not every giant is actually built on a foundation that we like anymore. That's one of the other things. Just
some
because
giants are just
it is
kind of mean.
Well, just because it is something that people know does not make it good. It is popular, and popular does not always mean good, as we found in November. I'm gonna make so many enemies on your channel. I'm so sorry, Jim. But
you gotta be you, okay? It's all good.
But at the end of the day, I still love this question because you're absolutely right, Zach. And for me, I think that a lot of it comes back to what is the person trying to do? Because I think that with so many giants to go back and look at and to read and to learn from, sometimes you can try to overshadow them and just miss. And sometimes part of overshadowing those classics is learning from their problems and doing it either better or different. Because some stories, a la The Wheel of Time, which is one of my favorite book series ever.
You're here.
It is my favorite book series ever. Does so much of both. It builds on those tropes and it uses those tropes when it feels right to do so. And then other times it goes, but this would be a more interesting story. This would be a more interesting trope. And by doing so, it then creates new tropes.
That then other people do.
that's what stories are.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
there is nothing actually new once you bring it down to its basis definitions. There's just people throwing old definitions at new problems or new settings and seeing how they kind of play. And so I definitely think that there are classics that no longer hold up, and that the modern stories overshadow them because they now no longer hold up the way that they did. But I would say that I think that the classics that do still hold up will never truly be overshadowed by modern stories unless they fall apart. Because as we realize that female characters have not been written super well in a lot of the classics, as
Or
societal
existed.
issues, for example, or societal issues that we realize as a society, we're like, oh, this wasn't right. People accepted it when it was written, but it wasn't right. I think those giants end up falling by themselves, and new stories take their place because there is a hole. Not that the classics really truly get overshadowed by new stuff unless they are gone in some way.
But to go fully meta, like nothing is ever written in a vacuum. Everything that came before goes into everything that comes after. So like,
absolutely,
if you've ever read a book, that's part of you, and if you write a book, it's part of you in your writing of the new story. So
well said.
And you don't even necessarily need to read them either. Because, like, again, if you take in any kind of media that includes that, or even if you've never seen Star Wars is affecting your story.
As long as you don't live in a vacuum.
As long as you don't live in a vacuum. Yeah.
So in Wind and Truth, and this is not a spoilers, in Wind and Truth, one of the characters, Hoyd, says this, and I think it's super true, that every story has been told. But that being said, every story is completely individual because it is being told by you. And I think when I read that, it was like I listen to audiobooks, so I had to pause because it was just so profound. Like it's true. Every story has been told. Like there's very rarely a story that is completely individual and unique. But because it's being told by that author, by that person, it's being told in its own way. And so it is not unique, but it is completely unique. And it's this like two sides of a coin that will never meet, but it is both those things are true.
Yep. Snowflakes and fingerprints, right? They can look mostly the same, but if they're all totally unique. Just like people.
Not actually true.
They can be 100%.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
But yeah, the sentiment
you must be a sci-fi guy.
And I love what you just said because it's lovely.
Yeah.
Not scientifically accurate, but it's lovely. And thank you for saying it.
You know what? Some of the most lovely things are not scientifically
accurate. Thank you, Zach. I agree.
All right, we have hit our 2-hour mark, so we're gonna bring this to a close. This has been a really fun episode, and it's because of our lovely guests, all of you who showed up here and added to this discussion. And shout out to Matt Stagger, who had to head off early. We really appreciated his presence as well. Zach and I do a lot of just talking to each other, and then I do a lot of talking to myself, throwing it out into the void. But this was a blast. And
this was last one.
All except Eric, we've met all of you because we're content creators, because we do this stuff and we've interacted and then gotten to know some of you through the fandom more, and it's you enrich our lives. So thank you for that. Thank you for being a part of this and enriching all the people who are watching. All of you in chat, you've been a hoot, tossing things in here. And just, I want to give one last chance to each of you to have a closing remark before we go. So who wants to go first? Closing room, not Zach. He's last. Who wants to go first?
So I'll go first. I've gotten a chance to know Jim outside this, and seeing him rocking his thing in the Fantasy for the Ages has been super cool, and meeting Zach through this. So I just applaud you guys. Keep making tons of content. And to all Jim's audience, Jim, I know Jim better. So Zach, I'm sure you're just as cool.
No,
But
it's
I'm,
not.
I'm very not cool.
Jim is a dynamo of a human being. Like, he also has a full-time job that he does very well. You would not believe it, but with the amount of content he makes, but
Got a books he reads.
he's a fabulous human, and I've been glad to be on this show a couple times, and I am far behind in seeing everything, probably because I don't read a lot of the stuff you guys read, but I love it, and it's quality stuff. Keep doing it, and I hope you hit 5,000 by next year at least.
Cool. Thank you, Eric.
I wanted to say thank you, Jim and Zach, for having us all on. This has been a blast. I always love talking nerd stuff with Jim. We've done this quite a bit and look forward to many more hours of doing this. Zach, I'm looking forward to having you on our show so we can talk some nerd stuff too. That'll be fun. It was great getting to meet Eric, and I've interacted with Daniel through chat, but we've never met. We've never been on camera. Nice meeting you, Daniel. Good to see you.
Well.
You know, so thank you for having us on. This has been a really awesome time.
Cool. Thank you, Glenn. Daniel?
Sure, we'll just round robin it,
There
or
you
clockwise or whatever. Yeah, again, thank you so much for having us. For those of you who have not, for some reason, you found this video but haven't watched a lot of Fantasy
Weird
for the
place to
Ages.
start.
This was really, really enjoyable, and I think that there were so many good things and like intelligent things said in this video. Not even by necessarily myself or Jim or Zach. This is the entire channel. It's lots and lots of intelligent, well thought out things about nerdy stuff. So if you like that, you are going to like Fantasy for the Ages. Congratulations again. You guys are super deserved for this this milestone. And again, it's been a blast. So thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you. Appreciate those kind words about our content. There was that one singing episode that's still just a patron-only one. If we release that, he might change his
patron-only?
opinion.
Carrie
that
has
was
great
real.
things to say about it.
I would probably not change my opinion because I am a singy guy.
Hey.
But I look forward to someday seeing that in the vault.
And Leia, keep going around the clock.
2024 was my year of the reread. I reread the entirety of The Expanse, Wheel of Time, and all of the Cosmere. So I know.
Wow, that's a lot.
And Pride and Prejudice.
Oh yeah, like just to continue a whole and like there were multiple other books. So my New Year's resolution, for the most part, for 2025 is to not reread unless I'm doing a show. So like I'll reread The Expanse when I'm guesting on Glenn's show. But that being said, I am going to be using Fantasy of the Ages as one of my foundational TBR. Like I don't have an Excel spreadsheet, but I do have this YouTube channel where I will be going to. I'm actually in Poppy Wars right now, which I know Jem and Zach have previously just gone and I downloaded all of those books being like, Jem and Zach will kill me if I don't read this because I know they love it so much. And I'm through part 1 of the first book and I'm just loving it. So anyways, I will be just like Daniel said, like I'm coming to this channel for all of my recommendations and I can't wait to go look at all their content. Never read any Stephen King, so please, Eric, don't throw anything at me right now, but that's on my TBR list and I know you guys have so many episodes about it. So again, I'm really looking forward to 2025, whole bunch of new reads and really being able to listen to your spoiler-free recommendations and then also go back and dig into the spoiler stuff, because I'm sure after I read all these books, I'm going to be like, I'm going to need to talk about it. I need to know more.
Jim and Zach are great to talk to about books.
Yep.
So great to talk to about books.
So,
Leia, you just encapsulated why we do this channel, though. It's about sharing what we enjoy, and helping other people find good stuff too, and then being able to talk about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We had a
and
great
also
comment.
a ton of dad jokes, some of which are good.
There's that too.
Yeah.
We had a great comment after one of my recent episodes where it's just, again, going through lists of books that I've enjoyed, and someone said, oh, okay, fine. I'm going to start The Expanse now. Subscribing to this channel is getting really expensive.
Yes.
That's great. But, getting people inspired to read great stuff.
Indeed.
Zach, finish us off. Take us home. What do you want to say?
You all said such wonderful, nice things about us in this channel that I could never say about ourselves or myself, just because, one, it would sound conceited. Two, we do what we do because we love it, and we love y'all and love giving this to y'all. And like I've always thought, I would have been happy with 5 people listening or enjoying our content or coming here. And the fact that we are over 2,000, it blows my mind. And I am overcome with the appreciation that I feel. And it reminds me to keep doing this and keep wanting to do this. My schedule sucks, but I always want to be here when I can. And thank you to everyone who's here, everyone who catches this later, everyone who's physically on the screen with me, for making this what it is with us. That's all the words I've got.
I will toss in for Zach. He has a full-time job. He's in school, finishing his degree. He has a dog. He games, and he's got a partner who does demand some of his time. Yeah. You've got reasons, dude, and
Look, I've got a better half, and
you can.
Those of you who have met her know that to be true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's it then. Thank you, everybody. Those of you that watched all of this, again, look down in the show notes, places we can find different content and connect with different people who've been here today. We love to share everybody else's stuff, and other ways that you can interact with Zach and I are all down there. Our Discord server, our social media links, etc., etc. Don't forget to subscribe. There were 2 more that subscribed just while we've been talking here, so that's cool, and we appreciate that. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.
See ya. Don't forget to be awesome.